Call to order the City of North Plains Parks and Recreation Board at 6 p.m. Stand for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lori, would you please take roll call?
Thank you. Chair Metcalf,
Here.
Vice Chair King,
Here.
Patty Burns, here, Zach Diener, Sherry Simmons, Andreas Prattner. And your ex officio, there she is online, Trista Papen, Counselor Trista Papen.
All
Hi,
right.
Trista.
Thank you.
Thank you. Consent agenda. Has everyone had an opportunity to read the minutes from October the 9th? Is
No, that's today.
that right? I'm sorry, August 14th.
There you go.
And approved them. We'll look for approval of our regular agenda then. Motion.
I'll second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Thank you. And there's no one online or anything, so we'll move on to item 7. So Bill Reed, urban growth boundary expansion. Look at that.
Yeah,
it is gonna work. Okay.
Okay, we have a city recorder who is always on to me about speaking closely enough to the microphone. So now that since you're sitting next to me,
I will kick you under the table if you don't.
thank you everybody for having me this evening. My name is Bill Reed. I'm the finance director for the city of North Plains, and I don't think I've been before this body yet. We've not been in a position where I come and talk about our parks and related things, but we're kind of entering some interesting territory regarding the urban growth boundary expansion that the city is undergoing. So I just kind of wanted to come and give an update about that, because we've had a big major step in that recently, and then we're about to begin the next stage of it with the county. So I just kind of wanted to go through some things and kind of tailor a little bit of it to what you all will be looking at and considering as this evolves. So the North Plains, I'll have a map here in a second, but I just kind of want to talk about the acreage and what this expansion is. So the city council on September 18th at second reading of ordinance adopted a new urban growth boundary for the city, and what that is basically just a new line outside of the city's city limits, where land within that line, from our current city limits out to that new urban growth boundary, all that land inside of that, the city has to think about planning for future growth over the next 20 years. Oregon state law requires that every urban growth boundary, whether a city has its own, or whether it's a regional urban growth boundary like the one just down the road that includes Hillsborough and Cornelius, the Portland Metro UGB, every UGB has to have 20 years of land capacity inside of it for housing and for different employment uses, different types of housing, but different employment uses, as well as parks, trails, public facilities, right of way, everything. So North Plains has been going through this process for quite a while. Kicked off with Vision 2035 a few years ago, and we're kind of only now we have a new council adopted urban growth boundary as a result of all of that. And this is a summary of everything that the urban growth boundary expansion is going to include. The city found need due to population growth that we have to plan for, of almost 111 acres of additional land for housing, an additional 17 acres for right-of-way for that, housing land need, and then parks land need based on kind of standard metrics of how much land you need to add when you have new housing of about 40 acres. Okay, and that's just a gross number. The number behind that 40 acres there doesn't reflect any kind of distribution of the types of parks by size or anything. It's just, this is the gross acreage that the city needs to be planning for 20 years for new plans. On the employment land side, commercial land need, which is retail, of course, and business park and other things that aren't specifically retail. That commercial need is just a little over 172 acres. And then for industrial land need, we've identified a need of about 515 acres. Now, that combines for about 688 acres of employment land. That includes right-of-way. Those numbers, those numbers don't have right-of-way called out specifically, but you combine those two gross acreage numbers, and that comes to an urban growth boundary expansion of just a hair over 855 acres. And that's the amount of land that the city needs for the next 20 years. And those numbers are based on city adopted documents. Two in particular, its housing needs analysis, as well as its economic opportunities analysis. And those two reports really kind of identify the how much land and why exactly. The state has acknowledged, meaning the state has basically adopted with us and acknowledges our economic opportunities analysis and all of the employment land need. The state is looking at, they were kind of in this window of acknowledgement, review and acknowledgement by the state for the housing needs analysis, because that was just adopted on September 18th. The economic opportunities analysis was adopted a number of months ago. But we don't expect any issues having to do with the housing needs analysis study that we're kind of waiting for formal acknowledgement. That should go through okay. Didn't really get any comments from any interests that had problems with the analysis and the numbers. So anyway, 855.2 acres of just gross land by type. And this kind of gets into some of the very specific numbers. In terms of housing, so we have to plan for population growth as determined or forecast officially by Portland State University Center for Population Research. Every 3 years, every 3 or 4 years, they do an update of their population forecast for each UGB in the state. And they are just in the very early stages of looking at Washington County again, because they just did an Eastern Oregon district, the Eastern Oregon district, and all of the UGBs over there. So now they're just beginning to turn their attention again on Washington County and Northwest Oregon. But right now, the forecast that we have from Portland State that we have to accommodate is North Plains has to plan for population doubling by about 2040, 2041. We're at about 3,500 people right now. 2041, maybe it's 2042, we're looking at a little over 7,000 population according to Portland State, and that's what we by law actually have to plan for. So the housing needs analysis is the document and the analysis that went through and figured out, well, okay, that's population, but how many housing units, how many dwelling units is needed for that? And that analysis came to a dwelling unit need of 1,348 new dwelling units, new housing units are going to be required over the next 20 years, in addition to what we already have. But at the time the analysis was done, we already had capacity, mostly in Bryn Hill, before it was really seriously building out. We had capacity of 558 dwelling units already. So that means that an urban growth boundary expansion needed to happen to accommodate land for 790 more housing units. And that's where the 167.4 acres comes from. We already had some capacity in our UGB at the time of the study. So we don't need to expand the UGB for all 1,348 new housing units, just the 790 we couldn't accommodate with what we already had. So that's where that comes from. Okay, so moving to the map. Here's what the urban growth boundary expansion as adopted by City Council looks like. It's really all of the lightly purple shaded areas are pink, depending on, it looks a little bit purple to me, but everybody's eyes are a little different. So, but that's the area, those are the areas that the city is is adding into its existing urban growth boundary with an expansion. It's roughly 50-50 east and west, with about 30 acres on the south side of Highway 26. But the green line, the thick green line, that just denotes the study area that we were bound by for looking at even possibly expanding into. Land around the city within the green line is what's called undesignated land under Oregon state law. And what that simply means is it's not specifically dedicated and planned for urban uses for expansion in a faster way. But at the same time, land within that undesignated area, what that means is that it's also not set aside and protected from urbanization either. It's kind of this in between. It's not protected for future. It's not protected from future urbanization for a long period of time. That's called urban reserves. That's not undesignated land. But the undesignated land around us also means that the city is allowed to plan in those areas for future growth. And so that's what we've done. And the purple areas surrounded by the kind of purple dotted line on that map are where we're expanding the urban growth boundary. You'll note we don't include Recology, just immediately to the southeast of the city. You'll note we don't include the Air Acres airstrip and housing around the airstrip just south of Highway 26 down to Beach Road, but we do include what is mostly the Jewett-Cameron Seed Facility property south of the freeway. And then over to the north and west, a lot of acreage over there that will be mostly future employment use, except for immediately north of town, probably will be residential, but those things haven't been settled yet. So here's a map that Doug was on the Chernow-Camp was on the UGB advisory committee, project advisory committee. And this ended up being the final map that everybody reached. We concluded based on everybody's input, this was the map of where the UGB expansion should happen and what the likely future uses will be. The UGB expansion process doesn't say, okay, these things are going to be here and these other uses are going to be there. The UGB expansion process we're undergoing and nearly finished with is just to put a new line out there. The comprehensive planning, the concept planning process that we're about to begin actually is where we actually formally paint the colors in on the map as far as what uses go where and how they complement each other and where infrastructure goes and all of that. But this is the map that Chair Nunnenkamp and the rest of the advisory committee for the UGB expansion study kind of landed on. The blue are employment uses, and those are the areas on the map where future employment uses probably make the most sense. They're close to freeway interchanges. They're in places that if people commute from outside of town, those places don't create traffic problems quite as much on Glencoe and other existing streets. So they're kind of better situated on the outside to not create traffic problems as much on the inside of the city. The golden areas are where likely future housing and parks will be concentrated, but certainly housing. Parks can go in a number of places, trails can go in a number of places, but for primary future residential serving parks, likely future housing will go where the gold is. And again, this is likely. We'll go through a comprehensive planning process soon that really kind of really gets into the details of that. Any questions about the maps? I'm just going to kind of go into what the process looks like next. So if you have any questions at all about anything, please feel free to ask. Now's the time.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Can you clarify what right of way is?
That's basically just city and county streets. Rooms, yeah, basically room for streets and
Streets, sidewalk,
trails. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, transportation facilities primarily.
thank you.
Absolutely. Anybody else?
to add on to the right of way comment, that's to add on to the right of way comment, usually that's where all the utilities will go in there as well. So that's what's dedicated for the right of way.
And this has already been approved and adopted, or?
Yes, so city council has already adopted this map. It's formally adopted. Now, when the city, the city's process is basically done. But we still have to work through the county process because if we, when we move our urban growth boundary out, what that does is that changes the map plan for the county. So the county has to go through its own amendment process by taking what we have and deciding yes or no on this. And then after that, assuming county adopts what they need to change, it goes to the state. But the city's process to date is done for just the new urban growth boundary.
And that's
itself.
just the proposed purple outline.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is there any reason that the county and or the state wouldn't accept it?
That's a great question. So, from a meets the law and ordinance standpoint, the county process should be fairly straightforward in terms of the county board of commissioners will ultimately hear this and decide on the law, whether or not to recognize and adopt this. We've been very careful about our whole planning process for the new urban growth boundary expansion has included county staff. And we've briefed senior county staff as well as the county board of commissioners about the process the whole way. So they're aware. And, you know, we've talked to them about it. And staff at the county have, you know, as far as they're concerned internally, all the boxes are checked. But when you go to hearing, you're going to get people who might not be crazy about the idea. And so you just kind of have to work through the process of answering those questions and making sure that if anybody raises any questions that raise legitimate concern about or uncertainty about something, that we, you know, that we come back and make sure that any information gaps are filled. But at the county level, we don't expect there to be any hiccups with the Board of County Commissioners. They've been pretty well briefed on this, and we've been very careful about law and ordinance on this too. I'll go ahead and move unless anybody has any other questions about that, or you can ask if anything else comes to mind. Okay, so really quickly, so this actually kind of drills into the details about the county process. Our plan, we have a county planning commission meeting scheduled for 6:30 on Wednesday, October 18th. It will be in person, and we are welcoming and encouraging people who support this from the community to go and testify at the public hearing. It'll be hybrid, so people can Zoom in or they can show up in person in downtown Hillsborough at the county hearings, at the county headquarters downtown on First. After the planning commission hears this, it goes to the Board of County Commissioners. Right now, that is tentatively scheduled for November 27th. If the county planning commission meeting hearing goes long and they move it into a second meeting, then that might bump the Board of Commissioners hearing of this into early December. But we'll see. Process is unknown at this point because we haven't had that first planning commission hearing. After a county decision, we feel good about the county approving this, but if they approve this, it gets submitted to the state and there's a 21-day legal objection filing period after that. Again, once you kind of get to the state, then broader interests who may or may not like the fact that we're expanding the UGB, you know, there are different opportunities for opponents to challenge legal points or issues having to do with the expansion. And so once it goes to the state, there's a process for all of that to be handled in different windows of time for potential challenges of the decision to happen. And at the very end, the Land Conservation and Development Commission makes a decision about the UGB expansion. And if they want something changed, they hand it back to the city in a remand. If they like it, they recognize it. And that opens up a window, I think 90 days for potential challenge of their decision. And if it gets challenged, it goes to the Land Use Board of Appeals. So, you know, that's the state process, and it's kind of it's a process. But anyway, that's the state, the county and the state. But the next big thing for this board I kind of want to get into here is just you may be aware, you may not be aware, but the city got a grant from ODOT and DLCD, Department of Land Conservation and Development, about $230,000 to basically concept and comprehensive plan all of this. And we won this several months ago. So the states so we've been careful to include the state departments in our advisory committee on this and our process. All of our hearings that we've had on this, and we've briefed them with with reports and updates. So the state's been very aware, and they've pledged $230,000 for us to plan all of this out with different land uses, and I kind of have bullet points for everything that will happen with this project. But a little bit later this fall, we're going to kick this off. We're in the final stages of approving the scope and hiring consultants to do this for us. And this should last through the summer of 2024, probably. So fall, a little bit later this fall through next summer. It's going to take a lot of community outreach and meetings. But the key deliverables in this process will have a land use framework for the entire UGB expansion area. And that will include parks, kind of getting into where and what sizes and types of parks generally the community wants to see, and where they should be located relative to housing, as well as located relative to employment areas. One thing that you all get to think about and consider will be with expanded employment areas. You're going to be looking at potential natural areas and trails adjacent to and serving and connecting housing areas with employment areas. Not unlike, if you drive Brookwood Parkway over to where the Hillsborough Library is on Brookwood, and you head towards Hillsborough from Highway 26, Dawson Creek Park area, there are a lot of trails back in there with water feature and the library, with a lot of employment area being added. You all get to help think about how that might look, or what something might look like around employment areas, not just serving residential areas. So that's just an example of how park and trail and facility interface might look with the employment land we're bringing in. So it's not just housing in parks and trails, that sort of thing. So we'll have a land use framework, urban design strategies for how to accomplish things, and including putting things together so that they don't conflict, so that they enhance the ability to walk between different things, ride bike between different things, and then the actual multimodal transportation and improvement planning that makes that possible. So we don't want to put high traffic things next to necessarily next to high density or high traffic things right next to a school. I mean, we want complementary design and complementary use strategies involved in this, and then connecting everything with multimodal opportunity. So this really is about, where do things go? What makes best sense for things to be nearby each other? How can they be appropriate, safe, and complementary? And how can we plan different types of infrastructure to serve it all, so that people can get around in a number of different ways that's still appropriate for a smaller community, to be able to walk around and get around, that sort of thing. We'll do a lot of infrastructure planning with this. We'll have an infrastructure finance plan that comes out of this. And then all the different land use policies, code amendments zoning that we're going to have to do to create for the different types of new uses that North Plains will see that haven't been here before. So we'll have to be planning for all of that too. And then finally, again, this is a number of months, and we'll have a lot of different outreach to the community. We'll have design workshops. We'll have information sharing workshops to get feedback on what previous workshops did creatively, to kind of inform what the process and what the plan should look like. We're going to have a number of advisory committees that will include a project advisory committee, with kind of key stakeholders in the community involved in that. We'll also have some technical advisory committees that will be charged with drilling down into some more of the specifics of some of these things. So there'll be a number of committees involved in this too. I mean, this is really what the land use plan looks like within the new UGB and where everything needs to be. So that's why it's super important for the community for us to give plenty of opportunity and encourage the community to get really involved in this. Now, after all that is done, we then have to go through and do all new master plans and capital improvement plans for all the different types of public infrastructure. So there will be a new parks master plan and CIP, there will be a new water, there'll be a new transportation one. And all those will have brand new capital improvement projects in them that came out of the concept plan and the infrastructure plan itself. Then we'll have to go through and update our system development charge methodology and update new SDCs to pay for everything that everything that's been identified in the new capital improvement plans that had to come out of the new UGB planning process. And then the final thing we'll do is we plan to update our urban renewal plan. And there's opportunity and legal ability for urban renewal to help pay for infrastructure in a UGB expansion. So we'll be looking at that as a possible, not definite, but we'll be looking at that as part of the toolkit for how we'll pay for some of the infrastructure we're going to need. The city currently has an urban renewal district, and it's primarily primarily Glencoe Road, and then turns left on Commercial and stretches most of Commercial Street headed towards Gordon. So kind of stops just short of the mills. So anyway, those are kind of more very specific things that the city will have to do on its own dime after the UGB concept plan process is done. Any question about those things? I think this is my last slide. This is just kind of a rundown of what the city's done and what the next things are coming up. And particularly where this body will be involved and have a voice in some things.
I've got a question probably for the group. What's the importance of waiting to do the master plan for parks after the UGB expansion as opposed to working on it now? Is there a pro or con to this?
Is that for me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, so I guess it kind of gets into the details of what a master plan and capital improvement plan is. We legally, if we do a master plan or a master plan capital improvement plan, we're doing that for land that needs a plan update. We're doing it for land that's in the city or in the urban growth boundary and either needs a refresh of a plan because there's been more growth or a new growth forecast and new services and new facilities are needed, or there's just a refresh of standards that needs to happen, every 5 or so years. Right now, the city doesn't have a ton of land at all. And so given that you're kind of looking at a UGB expansion being done here before long, a formal parks master plan would be something we would definitely be doing not long after the urban growth boundary expansion is final. And we're looking at 855 acres of planning parks and trails and facilities in a new plan. So it's kind of just a matter of you have a gigantic thing to plan soon. I guess I guess if I were thinking about parks planning for the city, I would kind of wait to see where things are going to be because as a result of the comprehensive plan concept plan process.
So I've been pushing for quite a while to redo the master plan because we were told when we did it last time when we needed to redo it every 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
And I was hoping to be able to get through that master plan of parks and trails before land got dedicated, which now I'm kind of feeling like I don't know if there's any opportunities for that now. Because the acreage and stuff has already been set now.
Mm-hmm.
So now in hopes of if we were going to ask for any more or need any more because of our updated master plan, that's probably not going to happen until the next 20 years now.
Well, I mean, after the comprehensive plan process is done, this new process that's kicking off here later in the fall, we have to go over and there have to be new master plans done for including parks, and the capital improvements that are going to be needed for that. So, I mean, there's going to be a guaranteed new master plan process for the whole thing. Probably in about a year, I would imagine.
So, things like that you're including, is that possibly impacts of streets and sidewalks and everything else that could get larger? So what does that do to the impact of the acreage that's already designated then? Does
Well-
it just take away from that?
Well,
Do we implement those new specifications then for streets and parks and trails and everything, or how does that work?
Well, I think the answer to that question comes out of the concept planning process. So like, for instance, like the only thing the UGB expansion sets in stone is where that new UGB line is. That's it.
But you can't blow outside of it.
No, you absolutely can't. No,
Yeah.
you cannot.
That's what I'm saying is,
Yeah.
well, let's say our new street designs, were 10-20 foot wider than what it has been. I don't think so, but just as throwing it out there, the acreage that takes up, is that just gonna take away from residential, industrial, commercial stuff then? Or do we have to revert back to what we had to begin with?
I would say that the comprehensive plan process that begins soon, we'll get into that. What those trade-offs might be. But I guess what I mean to say is that things may change. What's the best way to put this? As we move forward with urban growth boundary expansion, there is momentum to try to figure out how to make more or higher density work in the city to try to help with affordability. More smaller units, and whether those are 2 stories above the ground or 3 stories above the ground, or whether those are townhomes, row homes, or what have you. Council's heard a lot of comment and concern about housing affordability, about how much purely single family detached homes are planned. And the comprehensive planning process is the process by which, okay, we landed on this new line, but let's figure out really how are we going to accommodate these units? Are they going to be at slightly higher density in certain places? And if you increase the density for housing in some places higher than what was used to draw the UGB, that kind of creates opportunity possibly for roads to be wider, or maybe more land to be used for parks because you're using less for housing itself, or like there are parts that'll be moving. And it's ultimately up to the community, really. If the community wants wider boulevard streets, then yeah, adjustments are going to happen. Or if they don't want that, and they want wider bike paths next to streets rather than wider streets themselves, ultimately that gets worked out in the comprehensive planning process, I would say.
Is there any questions for him?
I think, if there's concern about like parks, park types, park standards, that sort of thing. I think what I don't think there's anything wrong with kind of like, as a body coming together and figuring out what new types of elements or what new types of things should the city be factoring into its comprehensive planning. I just think it's premature to do a formal, master plan study update. But I think you as a body and via your representative that will be on the advisory committee for the comprehensive plan process, if you bring together kind of the elements that you think aren't in the current plan, but you want to see in the new comprehensive plan, I think that is an option. It's just, it's short of a new study. But the thing is like I said, a master plan study itself is for what land you have in an urban growth boundary and within a city limit, it's city limits. And if you formally did that right now, you wouldn't be planning for much. You know what I mean? Because the new comprehensive plan within the urban growth boundary expansion area, that process might yield some things that are completely incompatible with the study you just did. You know, and that would kind of be, that might not be the best use of, your time and resources on that issue.
But if there's things that we know that we want within that master plan, that update, I mean, isn't that the things that should be in place though, before that comprehensive plan takes place?
Well, I think what you as a body could do is, is come up with a working policy document or something that you take and you put into the comprehensive planning process, things that say, we, upon consideration and review of the existing parks master plan, we see a dire need for at least one big park of some kind. You know what I mean? I mean, I that's sorely missing in the community. I see that, I hear that.
Yeah, we have that, but we need to manipulate or modify what we have there to begin with. And that's why we've been asking for this update for so long,
Yeah.
that we wanted to make those changes and updates, but.
But I think you can leverage what is missing or what has not been executed in the existing master plan.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you can, because
It's already there.
yeah, but it just there hasn't been an opportunity to do it. But I think, you will be far from the only people who will recognize and support the idea that there needs to be a centerpiece, important part for the family,
A couple of them.
multiples of a couple, I think I would say, but I would agree at least a couple. So I don't know, on one end of the spectrum, I see doing nothing, and on the other end of the spectrum, I see doing a formal new master plan study with the time and cost and the formality of it. And I think somewhere in between that gives you something in hand to shape the comprehensive planning process. Somewhere in between, I think I would recommend. We don't want I don't think anybody wants this Parks Board's concerns or, aspirations for what really need to be in the new UGB expansion. We have 855 acres to work with. I think we can do some things, and we have some areas that seem a natural for a larger park, or maybe even a couple different areas that might be unnatural for it. But I think something short of a formal study might be your best bet, because you're going to have to do a brand new formal study before long anyway. But I would encourage you to keep pushing for, a larger, nice park. I mean, the city really is missing that. And this is the time to figure out how to pay for it realistically, with as much, growth that is expected and the types of growth. Now's the time to think hard about how to pay for it too. The city's never had the opportunity to seriously think about paying for a larger park, or, what the city's share might be. Now's the time to start thinking about it.
That might be a good question too. Do we know what's in our parks SDC's account these days, roughly?
You know what? I don't. We were talking about the parks budget today, actually, and I'm not.
I'm sorry, I didn't ask for that before the meeting though, so I don't.
Yeah,
expect you to-
no, it's okay. It's a really good question. Off the top of my head, I can't remember what the current reserves and what the current balance is, but what I can say is that Parks SDC, the budget for the next 2 years includes money for new capital improvement planning, including for parks, and then a new SDC, and then the parks SDC portion, fund portion of the new SDC methodology study. So we've actually set aside some money for those things to be paid for, those studies to be paid for in follow up to the comprehensive planning process. The other big ticket item I would say there's money in there for like some dog park consideration and some other things that you all have been talking about. I know Andy put some money in there, made sure it was in there and council adopted it, but The other thing would be, Parks is paying its share for the new, Public Works facility over on West Union. So that's another line item in the Parks capital budget. But we do have money in the budget for those new studies too, so it's just a matter of getting to that point in the comprehensive planning process being done enough to kick off the next step.
I think how I interpreted what Bill said, if I'm not mistaken, is you can come up with a wish list and maybe review what we have had in the past as far as master plan. But as far as doing a formal master plan in the future, we kind of have to wait until we actually get the land. But that doesn't stop us from coming up with what do we need? What does the community need? But we need to actually get that out there beforehand, before we put it into the new master plan. So maybe we need a working session of some sort of say, what do we need? Canvass the neighborhood, see what do we need in a park? That's the kind of thing that I think we're ready for at this point.
Those are the types of things we've done in the past by doing them at like the chili cook-off or ice cream social or other community gatherings where we have boards around with questions, or even garlic festival, we did that one year there too. Wherever we can get the most gathering of people to get input and feedback. So I think that's what we need to look at again then is asking the community in that way. And giving different thoughts and ideas and giving them check boxes or however we want to do it this time. I mean, I don't know. But we can surely have a couple of different meetings and reach out to the community to come in front of the board and talk to us about what those different parks could look like and their sizes and trails and everything. So
yeah, I endorse that training camp, and I mean when this is all done, annexation will be possible. So this really is the time to get those things on paper, and we will want and will need involvement here to make sure that that's done the right way.
is that all you had then, Bill?
Thanks very much for the
No.
opportunity to kind of come and talk about it.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks for coming in. I appreciate it
Absolutely.
very much.
I'll come next time I come. I'll have a balance sheet for the parks company. I never lead with numbers that puts people to sleep. I'd rather talk about the fun stuff first.
I do have one question. Sorry, a little bit late. How is the land being acquired? Like, is it being like eminent domain? Is it being purchased out? What's that process?
That's another conversation to have with city council and stuff these days. So
Yeah.
Discuss the line.
Just curious, because it's a lot of space.
There is a lot. That's exactly right. There is a lot of space. As far as generally speaking, the city isn't buying, at least right now, the city isn't buying anything. The parks master plan that will be done for all of this, kind of in follow-up to the comprehensive planning process, that will identify very specifically the places where if a large park are necessary and land should be purchased, that will identify what and where. Okay, and then the city will go about buying what it needs to. Now, having said that, the opportunity, one of the opportunities that are, the nice thing, for lack of a better way of putting it, of planning a sizable expansion, particularly around North Plains, there aren't a ton of actual individual properties. There are a lot of very large properties and not many property owners who own those large properties. So we already have property owners outside of the city right now, but that are part of the expansion, who are already open to and talking about larger land donations, for credit against system development charges or whatever. You know, we're talking about setting aside land for a new fire station. We're talking about donated land for this, for that. The city's had that experience with Sunset Ridge and with Bryn Hill, and it's yielded, you know, moderately sized parks. But since this expansion is significantly larger and we're talking about very large parcels, we're going to be a lot more deliberate about where larger facilities like a park are going to be. And then in this instance, because we're dealing with larger properties and a larger expansion, there's a lot more ability and leverage to look at spending less money, you know, less cash out the door by the city and still achieving larger parks. So that's all in the master planning and infrastructure finance plan stage.
Question, is the current master plan on the website, or can that be sent to the new people?
It's on the website.
It's on the website,
Yeah.
so we can do it.
I believe if you go to forms and documents, it's in there.
Actually, the banner.
It's in
there's
the
a-
banner.
The banner across the homepage is, click here for all your information about the UGB.
I think it's
Is
just
that what you're
underneath,
asking about?
just underneath parks, though, there's a parks master plan.
Just.
Oh,
the park master
yeah,
plan.
and there, yeah, you
Yeah.
can do a search. Up
Okay.
in the right-hand corner for
Yeah.
any of the master plans. I think they're all on one page, actually.
I think,
Okay.
yeah, in one place, I think that's right. So what, if you don't mind, Chairman Camp, one last little bit of editorial from me personally. Your job, I think, is an incredibly crucial one with the UGB expansion, and here's why. We're looking at a lot of new employment areas and no small amount of residential areas. The challenge of this UGB expansion will be to put things next to each other, uses near each other, and provide different types of transportation access between them, with an emphasis on pedestrian and bicycle, certainly roads and freight and all that. I mean, that's important. But the charge that city council is given is not just be a bigger city, it's be a more viable, small community. And what do people do around here? They walk all over the place. I'm kind of shocked, even in the awful weather that Oregon, of course, has in the wintertime. People love walking around. You know, people come and visit and ride their bikes, but people love walking around this community. It's going to be crucial for this committee in particular, this body in particular, to help the city figure out how to put parks and trails and paths in places that maintain that ability for the community to be smaller and quaint and walkable everywhere and not feel like just a sprawl. North Plains is going to double in size. 7,000 is a lot more than right now. It's going to be bigger, but how parks and trails and paths weave through and connect everything to keep the community quaint and feeling smaller is going to be critical. And so that's really where we hope to hear from you. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. On to unfinished business. Dustin, we're gonna talk a little bit about the kitchen then.
I really don't have a whole lot to update about the kitchen, except for I got a few informal quotes, and there's a lot that I can't do until we have a design in hand. And so the quotes basically ranged anywhere just for labor between $40,000 and $60,000 just for labor. That's not including, you know, putting walls, materials, floors, or an addition or electrical. Once you add that and you add appliances, we're looking between $100,000 and $150,000. And when we get to that stage, then it becomes kind of a financial issue. We do not have the funds to do that within the next, you know, this budget. So that's something that we would have to prepare for the next budget. But in the meantime, we can probably facilitate maybe a study to see or make plans for what we want for the kitchen. And that's, I think, probably more important at this point. You know, do we want it small? Do we want it big? What do we want as far as that kitchen. So then we can propose it, as part of the bigger budget, because right now we don't have that money. And then the kind of confusing aspect on top of that is once it gets over $50,000, then it becomes more of a public, project with Bully, and then it basically doubles the labor costs. And then we have to, have everything go out for bid and everything like that. And it just kind of complicates the matter. But if we just do a simple remodel of the kitchen the way it is, that's not much of an issue, like $5,000-$10,000, we can get away with that. But it's pretty much anything under $25,000 we're in the clear with, but anything
I
over.
think there's some parks monies that's set aside for a year up through 25 even for Jesse Mays. Is that not correct, Bill?
Let me look that up.
I think it's between 23 and 25. There's like 150 or something like that.
Yeah, let me check that. I can't specifically remember off the top of my head because we made Jesse Mays its own enterprise fund for this budget. And we changed the rate structure, but I can look that up for you.
Okay, all right.
So it's a great idea. It needs to happen. As far as the funding, we just need to figure out that mechanism. And I think if we need to get funding outside, private donations, whatnot, we need kind of a better idea of what is this overall plan going to look like before we get that funding mechanism started. There's also other things that kind of muddle the prices. If it's all privately funded for a public entity, are we still having to pay that Bully? Do we still have to pay that rate and whatnot? And I think we also have to look at what are we using the kitchen for? Are we charging, for the use of this new kitchen, and how is that going to affect, is this, private, is this public? And it kind of blurs the lines a little bit. But I think going back to the overall, what we need is more of a plan in place so we can get a better idea of what the greater cost is going to be, so we can put it forth on the next budget.
And next budget is 2 years out.
2 years out.
So Chair Nunnecamp,
Yeah.
in the Jesse Mays Fund, we have for the biennium budgeted $4,100 for just generally speaking repairs, and a couple $1,000 for generally speaking professional services. There's no Jesse Mays facility capital improvement line item. in
So the
budget.
Parks Master Plan they don't look at the master plan then, or? I was looking at the master plan going, oh, there should be money set aside for that then.
Was that the money that was set aside for the public works facility?
It was money that's set aside for Jesse Mays Park for the parks capital fund would be related to the outdoor area, not the building itself.
We'll have to talk about that later, but because we had 400-some thousand set aside to begin with for this. Plus we got some of those grants and stuff too to help cover that cost.
Yeah,
And then we had another line item for 23 to 25, which I thought was supposed to be part of our budgeting
let me see.
in the master plan for Jesse Mays, which I don't think the community park is, I don't even think that was specifically for outdoor play equipment.
So, okay, so as far as Jesse Mays goes, for last year for the biennium that ended, the city ended up spending a little over $2 million for the rehab outside. And most of that was ARPA money. That was the American Recovery Act money we got from the state, actually. As far as for inside the building or anything else, there's no parks capital line item related to Jesse Mays. And in the Jesse Mays fund right now with this budget, there's $4,100 for just general repairs or improvements to the building. So it wasn't there, but that's all there is, at least for this biennium, specifically related to this building. everything that has been budgeted at least, and then spent, of course, through June 30th of this past year, that was all, everything outdoors.
I have a question. Does, you put staff time when they come there and set stuff up or clean or do whatever? Does it go against that money? Does it come full from that line item?
It does not, no. So this past year with the budget, what we did was we pulled Jesse Mays, this building. Not the, not the outdoor space, but we pulled just this building out of the Parks and Rec department. And we put it into its own enterprise fund. So that we could just account for those very things, how much staff time was being spent on different things, how much revenue was actually being generated by people renting this facility. So it's its own fund now. And it does, in the Jesse Mays Operation Fund, there is a kind of a specific line item for personnel costs. So we budget for that. So it doesn't come out of anything in that repair budget item is somebody independent called in to do something to the building of some kind.
Does anybody like, know, like,
I don't think there were mics on.
no?
There you go.
But yeah, like, do you have any information like how much revenue, like the building generated like last year and this year so far?
So different.
Yes.
Like,
I track that monthly for council. And hang on, I can, actually, let's put it this way. So, the new fiscal year started July 1st. And each month, Jesse Mays, rental of Jesse Mays, which includes this building, and then, actually, it also includes the covered area outside where, people come and have birthday parties and let their kids play at the playground right next door. Okay, so both of those things are in the revenue item. We've been averaging about $1,400 a month in revenue during the summer months. Now, that should slow down a bit outdoors because of weather. But the holidays with different events and things, and then the weather getting less conducive to outdoor activities, people coming and using, renting this structure. We don't know yet what that's going to mean overall to the balance every month, but so far it's been about $1,200, $1,300, $1,400. And the way that we've budgeted the fund right now, it barely cuts, kind of
Covers
covers
utilities.
utilities and repairs and that sort of thing.
So is this not part of the park anymore then?
It's part of the park, but because it has a revenue and operations cost because of the rental, we just are accounting for it separately. It's
So
more of an
how
accounting
does
thing.
that rental apply then?
Okay, so just the covered area rental.
Right.
That's so just the covered area rental and those are in that.
So that's all part of that.
Yes, yeah, but everything else, if you want to reserve pickleball and all, you don't pay for it, but everything outdoors that you can't actually reserve and pay for optional is not accounted in this way. It's still Parks and Rec.
So when we go and we look for funds and stuff,
Mhm.
this is not a park then. This is not, I'm just trying to get it in my head of how this building works.
Yeah, well, it's basically, and it's basically operated as an enterprise fund. So just kind of a little bit other little bit of background that's germane to what you're talking about with kitchen improvements. For this biennium, we pulled, like I said, we pulled Jesse Mays out, this building, rental of this building and the pavilion now. We pulled out of Parks and Rec and put into a fund so we could just see revenues in, expenses out, and 1-to-1. We don't, other events and revenues from other events were covering the cost of Jesse Mays, and we didn't have any idea, well, how much money are we losing on what little we rent Jesse Mays for if people do use it compared to the actual current expense of people taking care of it and repairing it and that sort of thing. So we also went about and increased fees for using Jesse Mays, actually. Because we found that the cost of operating it, what we were charging hadn't been changed in 12, 15 years. And so we went and figured out a new rate structure that reflected being an affordable rental in North Plains. But at the same time, did a far better job of paying for the expense of staff time and utilities and everything involved. Now, having said that, everything that we did in setting that fee would also involve looking at other facilities in other cities that are kind of more historic in nature, senior centers and the log cabin and banks and other places, to see what amenities they offer. And a lot of those other facilities have kitchens that aren't necessarily full commercial kitchens, but certainly offer more versatility and use if somebody wants to have a more fully functioning kitchen. And so we had our rates here for Jessie Mays currently reflect the fact that we really don't have that. And so we can't rent as much as maybe other places that do. But if we did have kitchen or other improvements here that gave Jessie Mays the ability to host events that it can't currently host, that would further change the rate structure, and that further changing of the rate structure would generate revenue that we need to work it out, but higher revenue that would help pay for
Right,
improvements.
so if we were to ask, the Parks, Foundation
Mhm.
to fundraise
Mhm.
for this, are we asking them to fundraise for the parks? Or is it for this, I don't,
Community center.
yeah, I don't know, I mean, what do you call it at that point?
Well-
To fundraise for?
It's still Jessie Mays Park and Community Center. It's just what I'm talking about in terms of how it's defined is purely accounting. That's all it is. I mean, I think if you talk to the Parks Foundation and said, we want to improve we want to, improve the kitchen at Jessie Mays. Council's on board. It's been one of their goals. This is what the vision is. I think they would still legitimately be the body to do that. For sure. All the changes I'm talking about though are just kind of more purely fund accounting, so that we're tracking what the differential is between the revenues generated and the actual cost.
So
of
when you say you
operating.
pulled it out, you didn't pull it out of the park, then you didn't.
No, from an accounting standpoint, we
Okay,
just pulled it out
alright.
of parks. Yeah,
Alright.
yeah. It's still community center park.
Okay,
Yeah, but we just want to make sure that.
I got it,
Yeah.
I misunderstood.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, sorry for any clouds on that.
It's like, it's still a park, but it's a subset of the park, more or less.
Mhm. Purely accounting, yeah.
All right. Any other questions for Dustin right now then on the
I think
whole
I-
kitchen thing right now? Yeah, oh, go right ahead.
So like, just from the current renters, like, have we like received any sort of like feedback, like, or complaints about like the kitchen, like, oh, this is what we need, this is what we don't have? Because
Mhm.
none of the renters complain, like, I mean, and I like a lot of.
Just
like,
me.
Yeah, so, I do like a lot of context here, but like, what's causing us to look into this?
She does a lot of like the spaghetti feed
Yeah.
and stuff here, so. She
I probably have the
probably,
most complaints.
Okay,
Whatever.
There is a benefit to having a nicer kitchen.
Yeah.
There definitely is one. As far as complaints, there have not been a lot of complaints, because people want the meeting space. But if we do make the kitchen more accessible, then who's to say that we will draw more, revenue, more attention, to that. But where do we go with that, that kitchen? Can we modify it $5,000-$10,000 and make it a little bit better, charge a little bit more? Or do we need to expand it by a couple hundred square feet kind of thing? Like, what is the balance that we need here?
I think right now, anything would be better than what we have now.
I agree.
Whether it be 5 or 10,000 or 350,000, I think anything would be an improvement.
Mhm.
And then when I do an event, I don't have to sit there and worry about, oh God, is the health department gonna say, no. We're gonna close you down right now, which, let me tell you,
so the board needs to discuss again then, what direction do we want to go?
Right.
Do we want to, you got what's there and replenish everything that's in there without blowing out any walls or anything?
Right.
Or do we want to hold out for blowing out walls and making a bigger commercial type kitchen out of it? So that's the discussion I guess we have to have again of what direction we'd like to take with it then.
Well, I think we could do both.
As in phase it.
Absolutely.
So, you know, blow the walls 1 year and then,
Well, I think we can upgrade what's there.
There.
What's there and work towards in 3 or 4 years, you know, however long it will take to help fundraise.
And then
Then
expand it out.
expand it out.
And that also helped with Bully as well, so.
I'd say we need to have that conversation, what that looks like. Are we this year gonna buy the nice big new gas stove? Or is it gonna be just cabinets halfway on the side, or what does that look like when you talk about doing it a little bit at a time?
Probably the appliances. I think the refrigerator doesn't have a working
The refrigerator needs to be twice as big.
thermostat in it.
Right.
It'd be big. And
I think we need to see if there is some type of a kitchen design company that could come and help us. Work with what we've got and what would be the best use of that space to get the most out of it. And, I mean, I don't know if it, whether it just be a builder who's, you know, used to remodels and that, or whether you'd have to go with an actual architect, I'm not sure. I mean, all you can do is ask. If the city isn't bound by any restrictions because of, you know, under a certain budget, then you just start asking different contractors.
I can get 3 quotes from contractors, just a general contractor, and we can make that happen for under $50,000.
Is there a way to like get a list of all the crucial, you know, aspects of like, you know, everything that would prevent an event right now from getting shut down by the health department? Like, we just get the basic requirements to see what that would cost?
Well, the health department will be here next Thursday night.
Okay.
I might be able to have them come a little early and talk to me about it.
There have been some concerns about codes. And so if we do upgrade some of those appliances, that might be a code issue. And so it'd be like pulling that thread on a sweater. It's like, if we get into that, then it might turn into a bigger thing.
Yeah, the sink might be a little bit of a issue. A dishwasher, I see, I'm not sure what all those codes are. At the senior center, you know, we have, everything is commercial, so that's a lot different. But let me talk to the health department and see what I can find out from them.
I think changing out appliances would be super easy.
Oh, yeah.
Once we start getting into tearing out cabinets or moving stuff in the walls or electrical, that's a whole nother nightmare.
One part to do is you look at the ROI on it as well, you know, I mean, start with. Start with the basics like that, see if it creates more demand, and if it does, then, okay, then let's. Potentially look at.
What's
the
the,
revenue streams.
I mean, we could go down the path of spending $5,000 or $10,000 on improving it, knowing that we're going to gut that in 2 or 3 years from now.
right? What's the
And there's-
biggest cost, Bill? To run this building?
The biggest cost to run this building? Probably personnel. All the staff time for different things. Yeah. Cause it's, you know, it's reservation maintenance, it's accounting, taking the deposits. The public works staff time of making sure things are clean and on and on and on. That's the biggest item, is the personnel fund.
I was gonna say overhead. Yeah, same thing.
We can bring this up, we can talk about this again next month if you want, and we can talk to, I know there's some just kitchen remodel places out there
Right,
too.
yeah.
Bigger companies that would come in and give a quote just to, you know, to do that, but do we want to talk again and really nail down what we'd like to be able to see within that space then?
I think so. I'm gonna talk to the health department and see what
Okay.
they say.
All right, I think so too. I think we'll talk again then November.
Is there like a maximum occupancy for the building here?
There is. Yeah.
Whatever's written over there,
You're standing on the wall down.
So there's someone.
Yeah.
it's over there.
I know it
That
is.
can help us guide, the size or type of, teaching, and I never experienced the pain of using it, but like. If there's a maximum, like, I don't know, 100. Right, good for doctors, you can probably. You don't need a commercial, like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what the rules are on all that. Only thing I know about preparation, if you're feeding to the general public versus private party type things, then that kind of demands different things out
Yeah.
there.
Well, and you'll need to have specifics once you go to fill out the paperwork. To ask the Parks Foundation to start raising money.
Right.
Yeah, they want to know what you're gonna get, so if someone comes in and says it's, this much for the new appliances and stuff. Put that on paper and they can get started on that,
Right,
right. Even if you don't have the cabinets done yet, a quote on the cabinets or whatever, just so they can get going on something. Cause right now, I don't think they're doing anything except, like Veterans Day and
Yeah.
Memorial Day stuff and,
right.
doing. So a little bit of fundraising and sponsorship, I guess is more what it is for those events. So they're ready to get going
Mhm.
on getting money for this board. So.
Okay. Thank you. All right, update on the parks, concerts in the parks. September 9th. How'd that go?
It wasn't a community attendance. I'm not even sure how to do it.
So long ago.
It wasn't that long ago. It was hot.
Was it?
It was hot.
I was like,
I mean,
everybody was burning.
we brought an umbrella even.
Oh.
Didn't want to bake, I mean.
I don't know if that park is the best one. I know the band was asking if they could drive up onto the grass to take the instruments up, all the equipment. I'm like, oh no,
Oh, no.
no. They had large equipment and so it was, struggle to take it up the ramp and
Okay.
walkway and that.
And there's no restroom.
We put a,
Yeah,
we put a porta potty there.
There's a port.
Yeah.
There are porta potties there.
City put a porta potty there.
But the music was good.
Mhm. Wasn't a big crowd, I think, I don't know if like maybe counted 40, 50 people.
Yeah. Yeah,
I can't remember what that number was, but.
same with the 4th of July. I mean, it was hot on the 4th of
Mhm.
July.
Mhm.
Hot. We need to-
We just don't have good shaded
No,
areas
we
for
don't.
this.
We don't.
And
It's
that
really
park
hard.
needs some trees.
Yeah,
mhm.
Throughout it.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
Okay,
see what we do next year.
okay, all right. Okay, so, under 9, it's topics for November. So I guess we have one of them right now, it's gonna be the kitchen. Is there other topics that the board would like to see brought up in our next meeting? That we can address or start working on?
Even new, oh, yeah, but
I mean, if we know what the projected UGB is going to be. And that's assuming that it gets through past the state. Maybe start looking into particular areas, whether it's. Finding location for the larger park that we've been wanting. Before before people start buying up the land and the other.
Well, that's not, we're gonna help define where those parks and stuff, where those bigger parks are gonna be to begin with. So, I mean, we're still kind of looking at 2 locations. We're looking at the one we talked about initially. We're by McCade Creek on the other side.
Yeah, I remember that
And
one.
then we're looking at, the pond itself out here. So the pond acreage itself does not come into that acreage.
It's not included in the
It
acreage?
is not. So that's,
And how far
that's a
out
that's a
around-
freebie right there.
And how far out around it,
How far out around what?
around the
How
lake?
far do we want?
Because it's designated residential.
That's where the parks are gonna be, or more likely in those residential areas, or maybe bordering residential, industrial, commercial areas. Kind of what we end up working on, to figure out where we want to have those parks at, so. I mean, you may want, like the big pond out there, you may want 3/4 of it to be park and residential, and maybe 1/4 of it or 1/3 of it to be industrial, commercial. So maybe you could have restaurants and stuff like that around it, or it's just kind of a planning process we have to go through to figure out what we want in what areas and how we envision it. Maybe we want it all to be just parked around it. And that way you have the housing and industrial commercial has to look, through the park to get to the pond, I don't know what we're gonna come up with. So that's something we're gonna talk about. And
Because I definitely think that the lake could be utilized for a lot of great events.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yep, and it's gonna be one of our largest parks, I assume, by the time we get done here.
I hope so.
Do they
But
still have a train track?
No, that's done.
Ah,
But you have an opportunity over here also. I mean, maybe that park over here isn't a 20-acre park. Maybe it's a 5-acre park that's not in swampland, and they donate the swampland for parking for us during the summertime or something, So we still have our opportunities to, and more than, I kind of have to say this too, it's more than likely that side is gonna develop first before this side will probably develop. Because we have to develop out to it to bring it in for a developer to develop around it. That'll probably develop out there first, so,
Well, I don't know, they're cutting in roads right up to the driveway for Lakeview Farms right now, so.
well, not the pond, no,
But it's
but.
right there, right there, yeah.
Right, so, that could be a ways out before we end up pulling any of that stuff back in again. This might come in first. This might be within the first 10 years happen over here. This may not happen for 10 or 15 years. So, they might not, I think, yeah, that's true.
So then should we create like a wish list of kind of what we're thinking and what we wanna do? I think that's the best approach for next meeting too, is.
Well,
what
we've
do we
got,
wanna-
we've got a lot before we get there, but we can definitely start thinking about it and we can start talking about it now, but this is not something we're gonna set in concrete right now.
No, for sure. I just
We
think
can
it's-
definitely have the conversation.
Yeah, I think it's worth creating some vision for where we wanna go with it.
Yeah. I think, our vision's really, we need to start talking about, which I need to right back to our master planning of our parks again, of what do we want our parks to look like?
Right.
I mean, we've kind of got this broad base of what's a mini park, what's a community park, what's this kind of park, and what type of things do we have inside of that? And we are so lacking.
I think we've learned a lot.
We have learned a lot, yeah.
And so that will
Um,
help with updating everything.
Right, right. I think some of our park sizing and stuff kind of has to move around a little bit. And maybe new requirements for bathrooms or water or lighting or, so yeah, I look forward to addressing those types of things, so.
I'll probably have to get Steve involved with some of the planning discussion for the parks, because I know that a lot of the parks being built by the developers has something to deal with.
They come to us with
Okay.
the parks
Okay.
that they develop and we give feedback on it, but
Okay.
that's another thing too, that we need to go back to public council on. And get a better understanding of how these HOA parks are really working out. I mean, it sounds like we don't have a lot of control over them. I mean, they can kind of do what they want to, and we have no say about it. And it's all to be able to save us from cutting the grass and watering the parks, is to give them control over that. We pay for the parks, we pay for the land, we pay for the equipment. But knowing how we're gonna pay for it in the future, are they gonna pay for it? Are we gonna pay for it? We don't know.
Yeah.
There's so many things up in the air, and we've lost, I think, control over what those parks are, so. I'm really concerned about the future of our parks if we continue to go down that
We do
path.
see a lot of like, overflow from, the rest of the community as well in Green Hills. I think that the parks are working pretty well there. The proximity is very nice to all the buildings. I think that there's some good lessons in there as well, like there's the proximity, size, and, how the community responded across the whole area using the park, so.
What parks are you talking about?
You know,
Broomhill, okay,
yeah, yeah,
all right,
so.
yeah.
Do we want them to be city parks or do you want them to stay
I don't-
HOA?
I don't know about that.
Depends on what you put in there.
Yeah.
So I think that's
Well,
better too.
Right now, they're HOA,
Yeah.
so
People out from it.
you can't.
No.
It's a
Yeah.
public park
Right.
still, but the minute we go to do a concert somewhere in a HOA.
Yeah.
Oh, whoa, wait a minute,
Right.
gotta have insurance, and we don't know if we want you to
Jump
do
through all
this,
the hoops.
yeah. And so the flexibility within those parks are, we don't have that issue out here at all, but we've had that issue out on the east side.
Yeah.
And it just, I'm concerned about it.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about what do those parks become in the future?
Now, is that park becoming part of the city's?
The bigger park out there will become part of the cities in 25, I think it is. 20, yeah, I think it's 25.
Are you talking about the
24.
one out here, out east?
Yeah. the bigger
Yeah,
park
that
out
one
there.
is, but the stuff in Bryn Hill,
Never will
no,
be,
they will not
yeah.
be.
I think it will make a lot of sense for the city to have more control, but like in terms of maintenance, can the city afford maintaining parks? I think we had a conversation about like the park right here with the artificial turf, like can we actually afford to maintain more? parks?
That's part of the UGB discussion and all the money and the taxes that we get from the new industry and commercial. That's part of it, yeah.
That would be great, especially if we could afford to like, have nice maintained parks and,
But see, we don't know if those parks out there, are they being maintained by HOA?
I think so far it's been fantastic.
I'm talking equipment.
Yeah, I don't know, like, again, like, I only know they cut the grass, regularly and they do a good job, but like,
So,
I don't know anything. else
Right.
about, like, other HOA does,
right. So I've asked that question quite a few times. I never get a straight answer out of it.
yeah,
Um,
in terms of like, what kind of equipment?
play equipment and stuff. They have to be replaced over so many years.
Okay, yeah, I don't
Um,
know. how that works, yeah.
so I don't know who's covering that cost.
Do they also take care of the chips on the ground?
Yeah.
That's all HOA, yeah.
Take all care of all of that.
All
Yeah, it's all.
They do a pretty good job so far, it's been super clean, but,
Yeah.
no. They're still selling the community, so let's see what's gonna happen in a couple of years.
Oh, yeah.
So
Right.
far, it's been amazing.
Yeah, it's nice to walk around in everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we love how.
Go ahead, Evan.
Another point to make is maybe figure out something to do about the rocks here.
They are.
The
They're
rock-
working on that.
Yes.
Yeah,
So-
that's one of the plans that we're working on is removing the rocks and replacing it possibly with pavers. That's kind of in the works.
So did we get any topics for the, in all this discussion?
No, not really, but maybe we can talk about what we may want. Expansion areas to look like. Or where we might want the larger parks and stuff. Right now, but. So we can have a conversation about that. We have a conversation about the kitchen again.
And we'll have some sort of like minimum requirements we need to, right, to make that kitchen working.
I think that's what, once you talk to
The health
the
department.
health department, I would like to prepare a little bit before next meeting, so we don't walk into it kind of blind. There's something we can do to maybe,
Well,
mhm.
they'll be here next Thursday and, I'll message with the guy that's for our area. I'm not sure. You never know who's gonna show up to do
Right.
the actual inspection. But I'll message with Drake and ask him what we need. Maybe we'll have to come out here and meet or something and,
Mhm.
or I'll see what if he's got specifics that he can send to me. For you. See where it goes.
Mhm. Okay, so let's talk again, probably a couple weeks before the meeting.
Yeah,
Because Lori needs an agenda.
Okay.
Set up a week before that, so.
Okay.
That's just kind of plan on talking a couple weeks before that,
Okay.
if you've got time. Okay, so we'll have a discussion about, maybe we'll bring some maps in, we can kind of draw on it and talk about it. If you guys want to take a look at online look at the Parks Master Plan that's out there right now. I think it was, I want to say May of '88, I mean, 18 of when it was adopted. There were two different adoptions. They adopted it initially. And then council wanted to go in and modify some numbers on the support. So they adopted it again, I think it's 6 or 9 months later, something like that. I'm still trying to get answers on what HOA parks really are and how they're maintained, and I know that you're fairly new here still, and I don't know if you.
They're gonna switch over to the city.
They're not going to. They don't.
Bryn Hill will not.
Never will. They will never be our parks.
They're owned by the.
I thought it was just like a 2-year agreement.
It's only that park out there, and it was a 5-year, I think it
Oh,
was,
5 years.
from the
So
last,
that's fun, nothing else will.
nothing else will.
Yeah.
So,
So we need to give up something in the parks part of the.
I really need to understand from the city and the council of how this was constructed. I mean, who's responsible for what and what say the city has in any of these parks or anything in the future
Do they
even?
have to follow our ordinances or anything?
There's certain county things they have to follow, don't they, for safety and stuff, but
Yeah, there's safety, but any ordinances, they follow the city, but usually HOA is more strict than the city.
they could say in 5 years, HOA could go, don't like that park over there, we're gonna rip that out, and we're gonna put, I mean, it's a water park in there, or do something different. We don't have any say over
Yeah,
that.
I doubt the residents would be fine with that also.
I know, I'm just saying that the thing is that maybe they don't like the pickleball
Yeah.
court, or maybe they don't like the linear park that's
Yeah.
being developed, or they may say, we just don't wanna maintain anything like that anymore, we're just gonna make it go back to grass.
Yeah.
The city doesn't have any,
Safety, maybe if it's unsafe, we can tell them to tear it down, but we can't tell them to rebuild something in its place.
So one thing that I take issue with, and I don't know, is all the green space in front of the homes that they're calling park space. Do they call that park?
well, there's a
space?
linear space that's got park things in it.
Not right in front of the houses.
Not
These are across the street.
Oh, I mean, the front
No,
yards?
ones that are in front.
Out in front of the houses, like the ones on. No. By in Bryn Hill. You go up the hill and take a left, is it Moon Street or?
Yeah, I can remember, and that's a long line that's like, there's like the property line ends, and they have a sidewalk, then they have like a
A big-
green area, and then another sidewalk.
I think that's
A big
why,
center area, a sidewalk,
Yeah.
a big green area, and are they're.
I think that's where the linear parks are going at.
Okay, so. It's. That's costing you guys a ton of money
It looks
for
nice.
the HOA, but it could be actual park space.
So there are linear parks in some of those areas up there. And they have,
Okay, so that's what a linear is.
right, so linear park is gonna have. What does it all have? It had horseshoes in it, didn't it have chess, it had some
Well,
walking.
you guys decided against the chessboard
It does-
because
I'm
that's, those are the kind of things.
I'm just talking about.
Yeah, they're
different-
just,
Like a little putting green or something.
yeah, they just, it's not like play equipment,
Yeah.
like out here.
Well,
but
and-
there's
There was like a
things to
tightrope or
do
something. Like
Yeah.
in the green space.
right,
like a balance beam or something, I can't quite remember.
yeah. So anyways,
Never
that's,
liked it.
that's a linear park that's supposed to be in those areas.
Where is
out
that?
there. I'd have to go back and look at the
I think
plan.
it keeps going past the main park for another like.
Oh,
block. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
It's only for like 2 or 3 blocks.
Yeah.
And then it
Oh.
it goes all the way up to Main Street, I know that,
Yeah, okay.
that's for like 2 or 3 blocks.
Where the steps go up
Yeah,
along.
so yeah.
Yeah, I never knew those steps were either in any of that planning, I didn't know that was happening even, that was odd to see. But-
All the steps down.
And there's a couple different terraces.
Anybody would buy those homes, and one of the first homes that was sold in the area was by the one on the corner.
Really, yeah. Okay, if you guys think of anything else you want to talk about or in upcoming meetings and stuff like that, shoot me an email, let me know. I mean, we're looking for topics. I know there's really things we really want to start getting after as far as like the master plan and stuff like that. We really need to start doing some more planning on. But Keeling gets kicked down the road a little bit more, and eventually we'll get there, but.
Yeah, but, yeah, I think that's fundraising.
Yeah, if we're doing a smaller version of this right here, it might be easy to go to them, and talk to them about fundraising for that then. So, they're looking for something to fundraise for the parks.
Trying to fundraise $75,000-$100,000.
I have to give them some real numbers. I have to have some numbers.
Cause they'll go to Intel first, probably, most likely, because like we have Intel employee on the council and he said, hey, Intel will donate all kinds of money to things like this. You just have to show them what you're doing and what the cost is.
Have they donated in the past?
Not to us. So we haven't used the Parks Foundation at all for anything
Anything,
in
yeah,
this board here.
right,
And they've only been around for
2-3 years,
2 or 3 years. They kind of just got going
then
and then
COVID,
COVID came, and so they're ready to,
Hmm.
you know, to get at it now. And they also have programs where if parks need to be cleaned up, like in the spring, if we want somebody, you know,
Well,
Intel will match.
volunteer hours.
Yeah, they'll match volunteer hours for stuff like that. So lots of opportunities. We, you know, just need to take advantage of them. So.
All right, any questions? Any comments? Any? No, just a minute. I'm not to you quite yet.
No, I'm good.
Perfect. All right, Jen.
I didn't do it, sorry.
Yeah.
There was, one thing in here that they talked about, and we had talked about potentially, rotating people for the meeting.
For the
Park Foundation,
Park Foundation, right,
Yes.
right.
it usually happens after this meeting.
Yeah, there's normally
Well,
a representative
I wanna-
for this.
I wanna-
Where is that? Did that get approved? Did we decide to go forward with that?
We're gonna wait until we get an initial thing to talk to them about. Then I'll go present, and then we'll start rotating people out. And it's usually like 4 o'clock. I don't know. what
3 or
day.
4 at the,
Senior
Senior
center.
center, and it's usually like every 2 months, every other month, or
Yeah.
every 3 months.
like
They don't.
on a
meet every
Thursday.
month. Yeah.
So I figured I'd go and present with them first, as soon as we get something to bring to them.
Okay.
And then if everyone's on board, just rotating out from there. If they're scheduled. I mean, there's gonna be times when we can't make it and stuff. We ask someone else to step in for us or whatever, just fine,
Okay,
you know, so. But yeah, let's
okay,
wrap our head around this and get something for them to start chewing on.
yeah.
And then we can be there every time to communicate with them, so. Back?
nope, I'm good.
Nada.
Anything else?
Nope.
We'll
I do
get,
have one question.
okay,
How is the park equipment holding up?
We do get occasional complaints that the nuts and bolts fall out frequently. recently because of the weather. We haven't had a lot of the electrostatic issues that we were having before. But I think we got to go in and we got to tighten those nuts and bolts quite frequently. And it's never the same ones either.
Really?
No.
Good in a way.
Well, yeah, because we go in there, we put some Loctite on it and then another one unravels.
They had a punch list, people who did this, did they knock everything out? Were they able to address everything?
Oh, they addressed everything that was noticeable. Yes. I
You
don't,
know, the kid sees a nut. And I'm like, oh, that's cool, I'm gonna take that. You won't know where that came from now.
Yeah.
Any other concerns about it? Oh, I know something I wanted to bring up. I'm so sorry. So there was a comment, in fact, you had made, I think, an email to me about would we consider possibly putting some new lines down to do pickleball and basketball court. And I drive by our parks all the time to kind of see how they're being used, what are being used, and what aren't being used. And the big basketball court down there in the wetland area down there, it gets used, but not very often. What do you think we could maybe talk to the association about lining that off and doing pickleball courts down there also?
I believe that's another HOA.
It is an HOA.
Yeah,
That's what I'm
so-
saying is, can we approach, or maybe can I approach the HOA?
We can approach them and as the parks board, hey, you know, people are interested in pickleball courts. Can you do this? But you can't force them.
Residents could go to them too. and say,
Yeah.
"Hey,
Yeah, but you could fit another 4 courts, I think, down there.
Yeah.
I mean, it would
Yeah, I
take.
think it
pers-
gets flooded some of the times.
Yeah.
and that's understood. I mean,
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
I thought, that's there's gonna be a lot of people around that area. And if these are the only courts, maybe if there's 4 more over there.
Yeah.
No,
Are you,
no.
connected with the HOA?
I can try to reach out, yeah, there's a company that actually does the whole HOA management right now, so it hasn't passed on to the residents yet. Yeah. So we could
right.
talk to them and,
And really the cost of the parks and stuff was all on the city.
I could try to reach out to them and see, what that would look like, I assume that they would have to cover the cost, right, or putting that chain to stay on the park, or how that work.
That would be HOA.
I don't know if HOA would be at that point because they're done with the park already, so it'd be HOA. So it'd be the cost of nets. And then doing some new striping in different colors or something, so it doesn't
Yeah.
blend in with the basketball part of it, I don't
Around-
think nets were that bad. Were they $1,000 a net or
A little bit more.
a little bit more? So it might take 4 nets if there's room for 4 spaces down there.
Yeah, I think that.
And then whatever painting is gonna cost then, but I don't know, I just thought that was a good possibility of.
I'll reach out and I'll see, I'll get back to you like in the next meeting and
Okay, all right,
see what they say, what's the process, if they're open to it or not.
all right, okay. Great, thank you. Okay,
All right.
I think we're done. So, sorry, I forgot my city council. I'm so sorry. You've been so quiet over there all night. Do you have any comments or feedback for us?
No worries. And I just want to say thank you to each one of you for your volunteer time and participation to make our parks what they are, which are wonderful. And my only question was regarding the Pacific Purple Park and the dog park. Is there a proposed timeline of when that might be completed?
I think it was springtime because we've kind of gotten to our wet season right now. So they're probably looking at spring before they could start something. Is that right?
Yes, we're working with Jewett Cameron and possibly some it's not cost share, but they're going to provide some materials for some fencing over there. Maybe some man hours, but that would be a great volunteer opportunity in the springtime when things kind of clear up, because I know that park floods and that's why, be a good, place for a dog park. but yeah, it's in the works for kind of mid, late spring. That's all the information I really have about that.
All right, well, that answered my question. Any feedback or anything I can take back to the city council as well?
I don't think so right now. Well, I'm really looking for better understanding of how the HOAs really function within the city. But I probably ought to start with Andy and stuff first and trying to get that information there. And if everything needs to be clarified or whatever, then I can always go sit in front of the council.
Come on down, and I would love for that partnership. And I will just speak on just behalf of Sunset Ridge 1. I know in our reserves there is things such as like replacing the bark on a semi-annual basis, that sort of thing. So I know again, that's just one piece of the puzzle, but I do know some of that does fall within the scope of the HOA.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll close the meeting tonight at 7:41. You everyone. Thank you.